So the first camera we have that we use, and we have 5 of these in the church and we're integrating them into the service, is this Canon VIXIA HF R800. So it is these will probably be most of our static cameras, but it's the camera you'll use most. So the way it operates is a camera is pretty simple. We'll go to the front of it. So the front has a shutter cover, and you have to make sure whenever you're using it to open this. It's not automatic, so you have to make sure you pull down, and that opens it up to where you can see the lens. The power, and there are 2 cables that we'll plug into this camera. We will plug in a power cable, and we'll plug in an HDMI cable. And if you just point towards this way, you can't really see it up here, but all of the cables go back towards the control booth in the video booth. And that's where it gets plugged into the system. So this HDMI cable is what plugs the camera into the system. So the first thing we do is we plug in the power. It's plugged in here. It's pretty simple to plug in. It's very specific in the way you plug it in. So it's on the right-hand side of these cameras. The camera is now plugged in. To plug in the HDMI cable on the left-hand side, you have a viewfinder that folds in. So you unfold the viewfinder, and then you'll see down here we have 2 different types of HDMI adapters. And this is a mini HDMI. Plug it in here. And that's all the cabling you need for the camera. So at this point, the camera's ready to be powered up and turned on. But before I do that, here would be the point where before I plug in all the cables, I'm gonna mount the camera to the tripod. So again, pull the lever. Fit the slider into the camera, push it forward, release the slider, and the camera is now mounted. Now, to plug in I just showed it to you, but to plug in the power, it's a U-shaped adapter on the right-hand side. You just slide it in here, and the power's there. Open up the viewport. And we will plug in the mini HDMI cable here. So the power button for this camera is, after you open the viewfinder, it's to the top right of the HDMI cable. It's a push button, and once you push this button, you'll see this green light comes on. And then you'll see the viewfinder will show you a view of where the camera is looking, and it's currently working now. Currently, there's no memory card, and that's okay. We don't actually do physical recording on these devices, so that eventually goes away. Now, some things to look at on the camera itself are setting up the shot. And the way to set up the shot is using the tripod adapters that we talked about and making left and right movements. But the next thing we talk about is the zoom. And so on the top of this camera is a zoom apparatus, and it's a left and right push. So if you push left, it would zoom in or out, and if you push to the right, it will zoom in. And you have that much flexibility. If you start pulling back to the left, it'll again zoom out. So you have a wide range of zoom that you're able to use. So for this camera, what we would do is we would position the camera where it was supposed to be at, and then we would zoom in and to where we needed to be. So let's say in this scenario, we're going to try to be as close to the stage as possible and avoid chairs. So I'm going to zoom in here, and I'm going to get like the table there. And you see I've zoomed into the table. So if somebody's standing there preaching, that's about where that should be, probably their height. So you would be able to see them. If we had somebody on the screen, we could show you the different dimensions, but that'll come in a later date. So this is how you zoom in. You'll notice on the camera here, you see that there are cross hatches, and that's called a thirds grid, and that helps you align your shots. Remember, I spoke earlier about having the ability to use the level to try to keep the camera straight, but you can also use these third grids to make sure they're straight. So like in this scenario, I would say I wanted to try to make sure it was straight with the top of that table. And you notice how if you look at the line, it goes across the top of the table, which that tells me that we're fairly parallel to the ground, horizontal to the ground. So that's how you basically set up this camera. There are some settings that we'll get into at a future, but this is at its base. Zoom, pan left, pan right, scroll up, scroll down, and that is the basics of this camera itself. We'll like I said, we'll do more training on the details of how to set up the different white balances and exposure at a later date.